Absolutely proper, Mr. Dan Earlywine, here for your Luthean pleasure. And take it away, fellas.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, dog.
Welcome, everybody, to this is episode 11 of the Dan and Doug Show. We've been doing this almost a year. I think we've actually been doing it for longer than a year. We skipped a couple of months. But so here we are for this edition of the Dan and Doug Show. I wanted to do something different today. We normally cover some aspect of repair in some detail, but I wanted to do something today a little different because I thought it was an important subject that deserved a conversation, and I didn't know exactly where to put it. It fits somewhere in the kind of business talks that we've done, but I wanted to get Dan's take on this as well, so I thought maybe it would be a good thing to slip in here. The whole concept of when you intake an instrument or you take in an instrument and you go through not only your intake but your evaluation process is something that we all have to deal with, and is somewhere where we can really very easily wind up taking it on the chin if we're not careful about how we do that process. And so I thought it was a really good conversation for us to have here. For me, and some people have heard me say this before, that our front counter area, which is where I am now, this might be a part of the shop some of you may not have seen before, but this is our front counter area, and I consider this probably not only the most important part of our shop, but the most profitable part of our shop, because this, as a contrary to what some other people I've heard say, this is where I make my money. I might earn it in the shop at the bench, but I make it here, or I lose it here. When a customer comes in with an instrument and your first task is to interact with the customer, come up with an estimate, and examine the guitar, if you're not careful, by the time you get the guitar to the bench and you're earning your money, you might have either left so much money on the table, or B, put yourself in a position where you're constantly having to call the customer back saying, oh, when you dropped off that guitar, I didn't notice that you had 3 loose braces, and now we have to repair that. Oh, well, okay, well, what's that going to cost me that, now that you've theoretically already examined the guitar? And then after you start working on the instrument, there's something else that pops up, then you have to call the customer back and wind up having to have that uncomfortable conversation again. And that only serves to make you as the luthier look unprofessional in the customer's eyes. And there's this constant negotiation that has to then take place. Very often we all wind up taking that on the chin because you wind up throwing in a lot of repairs that you didn't think you needed to do or didn't realize you needed to do, and now the customer's complaining that if he knew all of this beforehand, maybe you wouldn't have spent all of this money on this instrument, but now you're halfway through the job, so what choice does he have? They feel like they're put in a corner of an uncomfortable decision to make. You're in a position where you now have to have these kind of these queasy conversations with the customer. And very often, most of us, I know I do, I default to, you know what, I'm just going to throw these in for free because I didn't catch it when they came in, and we're just going to wind up doing it for you out of pocket just to make a customer happy, and it winds up costing you money. So for me, this is the area where I'm making my money, and it is somewhat of a sales job. Not that I'm selling repairs, not that I'm trying to talk a customer into a repair that they don't need, but I am going through a process where I'm examining an instrument and telling the customer what the guitar needs. I think Evan probably if I paraphrase what I've heard Evan say in the past, he says something to the degree of in order of priorities, he and his shop comes first, the guitar comes second, the customer comes third in terms of needs. Um, and it's a similar philosophy to that, not as succinct as he put it, but when I have a customer come in, many people have heard me say on the last episode of the business talk that we did, the roundtable thing, that while the phrase "the customer is always right" is a misnomer. It's a fantasy. It's a fiction. The customer is hardly ever right. The customer is always the customer, but they're very often wrong. When a customer brings you a guitar, hands you the instrument, says, "I think I need new tuning machines," we all know as lutes that that's probably 99% of the time not the case. What they're complaining about is a tuning issue that we have to discover. It might be a nut that's pinching the strings. It might be a string length compensation problem where they're misreading how they're tuning the guitar. Or you might just have a customer that just doesn't even know how to tune their instrument. They're still the customer, but they're very rarely right. So it's my job at the front counter to listen to them and try to decipher what it is they're trying to say. That's where I have the most control over the conversation for me. Uh, we've always had, we've always forced the luxury of having a customer service area that's just for us and the customer, just for us to interact. In our current shop, we have a particularly nice, luxurious area for that to take place. Even when we've been in small shops, we've made sure we've had separate areas just for the front counter, just to interact with that customer. Um, the uh, the reason for that for me has always been twofold. One, I don't want my customers in my shop unless I'm just giving them a courtesy tour. If I'm giving them a nickel tour, if it's somebody I like, it's somebody who asked to see the shop, I'll give them a little quick tour through the shop, and we'll come back to the front counter and we'll do our business. But I don't want to be dealing with customers in the shop because they get too easily distracted. If you're standing in the middle of the shop and you're trying to listen to me about your guitar, but you're looking around and going, "Oh, what's that? Is that a gold? Is that a '50s gold top? What is that? Is that a Gretsch whatever? Is that a Brian Setzer model?" All of this distraction for the customer is not helping me get through the interaction with them of taking in their guitar, nor is it helping them because they're no longer paying attention to what I'm saying. To me, the front counter area or my reception area is very carefully thought out for a particular with a particular set of goals in mind. If I give us a quick glance around the customer area, we all know that certificates from guitar companies mean very little to us. All they mean is that I get $40 from Taylor once in a while.
Doug,
But
your white balance has it's gotten
oh,
very dark. I don't know if you can
oh,
adjust that on your
my
on your
laptop.
phone.
Why don't we do this? Why don't I do it with is my white balance still lousy?
Yeah, it's pretty dark. It's okay. I struggle with that. It's because you're what the light streaming in from your windows there.
Okay, so why don't I do this with this camera over here? So is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Those certificates only mean one thing to me. That tells the customer in a visual, in an instant, that I know more about their guitar than they do. As we look around, we have, the part of the front counter that's behind me. This, by the way, my front counter comes with instructions. The guitar goes there, the case goes here, because you don't know how many people would actually put their case up here and I have to fumble with their guitar. But we have a place to put their case. We have all of that visual eye candy for them. I have a computer that I can access, like the computer in my office and all my customer records from. I have the area that's behind me. Here we've got all of the paperwork I need. I have a bunch of visual cues for customers. I have half a Martin guitar that if I have to explain some inside the guitar repair to them, I can easily grab it. We have all of the different kind of diagrams we would need if I need to explain anything with braces to a customer. It's here. We have any kind of subtle hints to a customer, strategically placed. This one, for example, that's there. But more importantly here is I have all my paperwork behind me, and I have this. This whiteboard is one of the most important tools in my shop. This has made me more money than any tool I've ever invested in, because the ability to explain to a customer very quickly what they need done on their guitar and why it costs what it does and what we have to do saves an incredible amount of time. And of course I have a neck here if I need to talk frets with somebody, and him if we need a collection agency. So that's our front counter. And the other thing I'll mention about my front counter is this. This is designed to save me time. Whenever I'm at the front counter going through an examination on a guitar and I need a tool, whatever it might be, if it's, you know, say a Saddle-matic. Go ahead.
Can you point your camera down just a microscope? Let's get a look at that drawer. Okay, there we go.
Okay. So if I need, for example, a Saddle-matic, it's here in the drawer. I have drawers filled with all of the tools I need for the front counter. That's quite an investment. That happened over a period of time. But what typically would happen is that if I'm working on a customer's guitar and I need a particular truss rod wrench, or if I would need my little StewMac screwdriver set, or if I needed some Allen wrench, some kind of a spatula, any kind of a straight edge, for the purposes of doing those examinations. As soon as I had to leave my front counter to go into the shop and tell the customer, hang on a second while I go get, say, a Saddle-matic, if I'm using that for a diagnostic tool, or a screwdriver, or a flat or a fretting hammer, or anything. Anytime I have to leave my front counter, go into the shop, go find a tool, and bring it back is wasting my time. So what I would do every time that I found that I was lacking a tool at my front counter, I would put it on a list, and the next time I could afford it, I would buy one just for the front counter, because this saves me the constant back and forth to the other room just for the purposes of examining a guitar. I want to get through the examination, get the customer out as quickly as I possibly can, depending on the job, and get back to work. I don't want to have to spend half of my afternoon running out to the shop, finding where that tool is, bringing it out here to the front counter, using it, leaving it at the front counter, and then when I need it back in the shop again, I have to go wandering through the shop to find out where I left it up at the front counter. So if it's any tool that I need to examine a guitar, it's up here. I'm not particularly conscious about how clean the drawers are up here, because I know where everything is. I always put them back in the same way. All my feeler gauges are up here, so I load feeler gauges into little handles and label them so they're easily identifiable, whether they're feeler gauges or wrenches or whatever they be. They all wind up going back to the same place. I have any sort of examples for nuts and saddle materials that I need to discuss with a customer. If I need to talk to a customer about a tuner, an example of it is up here, or their switch, or anything I need up here, it's always up here. Any form of other things I need for administrative stuff or electronics testing is here. Any other type of stuff that I need for just, the The intake of instruments is all there, all available for me for whatever I need. And that's it for the front counter. That's just a brief tour of what the front counter is for us. And it's the most important place in my shop. We've always been very particular about setting expectations for customer interactions with us. We want to have the customer have a, kind of a really good experience. The customer quality of experience, quality of their interaction with us is important to us. We charge a lot of money for our repairs, and we want to have a really good interaction. We want it to feel luxurious for the customer. We want them to feel comfortable with where they're dropping their guitar off. We have, as many of you have seen, a little customer lounge, which we've always had some version of this. Sometimes it was just a closet. This is a little bit more luxurious, where people can sit and play a guitar, plug into a nice amp. And, I can discuss it with them at length. Here, most of the time, people are playing instruments when they come to pick them up. I can close the door, walk into the shop, take care, and leave them here for as long as they want to be here. And, and that kind of thing. So that's the front counter area. And that, to me, is kind of a real important part of, we can come back to the other camera. That's a real important part of the customer experience. Actually, let's leave this up for a minute. When a customer comes in, we're gonna discuss this stuff with Dan in a minute, and then after that, we're actually gonna go through a physical examination of a guitar. So, and we're gonna use this kind of a basket case of a Martin to do that. We might do a second one if we have time, but that's the physical aspect of the front counter and our interaction with the customer. The process that we go through for every instrument is the same. We'll go through the physical examination later. But for me, and I know there are different opinions about this, which is why we want different people talking about this on this program we do. We examine a guitar when a customer brings it in. We make an appointment. We used to do customer service hours where we were just open Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from noon till 4, and people would come and go as they please rather than make appointments. I personally like it better that way. Sharon feels the opposite of that. She prefers appointments. Now we're just doing appointments. And then since COVID, it had been, since post-COVID period, it's been by appointment only. What we do going forward is probably going to stick with the by appointment method. But when somebody comes in with a guitar and during their appointment, I want to examine the guitar then. I want to know everything I need to do with the guitar then. I want them to know everything that needs to happen onto their guitar at that appointment. I want them to know what it's going to cost. Sometimes have a general idea of how long it's going to take. We've actually moved away from giving turnaround times to our customers. And I want that all to take place at that initial interaction. I don't like people leaving me with a guitar and then having to examine the guitar later at some additional time, then to spend a lot of time emailing back and forth or phone calls and answering and asking questions. That, to me, for the way I work, is for me where the time is wasted. Because I can get easily sucked into forgetting to email somebody back, and then you email somebody back and you forget to put something in the email. For my head's sake, I'm much easier dealing with a customer while they're here. The one advantage for me personally is that if I have a guitar that I don't want to work on, if I have a guitar that I think is not worthy of us working on it, because I tell my customers, this interaction, this examination is both for me to decide, well, both for them to decide whether or not they want to leave us the guitar to work on, but it's also for me to decide whether I want to accept the guitar for work. And that's a two-way street. I've had customers bring me guitars that they want me to work on that I don't want to have anything to do with, because it's either a basket case of a repair, it's going to be way more expensive on the guitar than the guitar's worth. Sometimes you make exceptions for that for, sentimental value and all of that kind of thing. Or if it's a really good customer and they're willing to spend the money, that's fine too. But the one thing that it gives me the opportunity to do of doing the examination at the point of the initial interaction is I get to be able to pick the guitar up and hand it back to the customer and let them take it home if we're not going to work on it. Or if I don't like them, they can take the guitar home so I don't have to work on it. Because if I don't like them, I don't want to have them come back to pick up the guitar after they left it with me, because that leaves a second uncomfortable interaction when they're coming to pick up a guitar that you say, you know what, I really don't want to do this just because I really don't like you.
Have you ever thought about lying in that situation?
I don't lie
Okay.
too much to my customers.
All right.
I've been accused of being less than tactful to my customers. I don't mind having an interaction with most of my customers. I'm not looking for friends. I got plenty of those. We have customers that are dear friends of ours that we've worked for decades, that we have wonderful relationships with. But my job here is to work on your guitar. And I'm perfectly comfortable with the understanding in the relationship that I'm the one in control of what's going on with your guitar. When a customer comes in to me and says, here, I just needed this. Okay, well, I guess you're the expert. Why don't you do it? And I'll say that to a customer. I do it tongue in cheek. I try to do it with humor, but I'm more comfortable with them having the understanding that I'm the one who's in charge here, even though they're giving me money. I do not want to be in a position where a customer considers me the help. I'm not going to do that. Not anymore. I did that a lot when we were first in business. When first decade in business, you took in everything under the sun.
Just to back up on that just really quick, do you think that was a mistake to do that from the outset, or do you think that's just part of getting going? Like you have
no,
to.
that's part of what you have to do, because
Okay.
you got to eat, so when that customer shows up and he's got 13 Rickenbackers, you've got to suffer through that.
So you're not suggesting that somebody that's just getting started to act like you.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, there we go.
But I do think somebody who's just getting started needs to understand that they don't need to be subservient to the customer. There is such a thing as, I've said it. I think I said it during the business talk, that we are providing a service to the public. So we don't have to be rude, but by the same token, I'm not providing a public service. I'm not the DMV. So please don't treat me like I'm working at the DMV. And there's a fine line that can easily cross into that territory. But for the purposes of examination, several of the things we do, and maybe we can turn the camera down, Sharon's going to be camera person here for me. The few things that I do, if you want to go right down to the table. Let me put this in a stand. Here.
No,
Put it
it's
here.
fine on that.
You okay? You all right?
Just that I can't see right.
Okay.
Let me just.
Just do this. Hang on. Right here. There we go. Okay, so several things that we do when a customer comes in is we have our pre-printed intake forms. This is where, from an examination standpoint, there we go. This is where everything starts. Once we have had a quick look at the guitar, we get an idea from what the customer, what they want to do. We get an idea of what their desires are. Then we start examining the guitar in detail. This comes out once we're of the understanding that this is a guitar that we're going to accept and we're going to be working on, that we use. This is something that evolved over a good long period of time. I need to see if I can pinch this in a little bit more. Hang on. There we go. That's it. So this has all of our contact information here. This number here is the work order number that a guitar gets. This, before 2002, was a different code. This means something. Before 2002, we used like an alphanumeric to try to give us all sorts of information. It was like a serial number in the sense that it had a date code in there, what week it came in the year, what day it came in, all of that kind of stuff. We gave that up in 2002. In 2002, when we incorporated the business, we also were moving into a commercial space. I decided to change this number, and we started with work order number 1. Now we're at work order number 36,481. So we've had 36,481 instruments since 2002. That's 36,482, 83, and they just go up in numerical order. The next customer that comes in, we get, gets the next ticket. I do that for a particular reason because I can easily look at the computer and determine what was the first work order we did at the beginning of the year, what was the last work order we did at the end of the year, and I have a very easy number. I just do the math to subtract the difference, and that's how many guitars I had were in a given year. It's an easy way to keep control of that. Then we have name, phone number, instrument serial number, the date it is, estimated completion date. I've taken to the point where I no longer even fill this in, because if you write this in for a customer, they consider it a promise, even though it says estimated. No matter how much you talk to a customer, they will remember it differently when they get home. And I've always written a range in here, 4 to 6 weeks, which is 4-6 WKS, or 10 to 12 to 14 months. It never works because either sometimes the repair takes longer for a particular reason, and then you're up against it with a customer who had considered this a promise rather than an estimation. So now I just write ASAP, and a customer is aware that there's a range where I expect it to take place in, but I'm not going to be beholden by that. Then I make a list of all of the work that's going to be performed, what kind of strings the customer wants, the address of the customer, email address for the customer, and then they get to read this. And unless they're a repeat customer, there we go, I make them read the whole thing before they get to the bottom and sign it to leave me the guitar, authorizing me to do the repair. This we can post if we want on the Duluth Group website. This is just an example of the intrusion of attorneys into our lives. This is the one thing that saves us from having to deal with that customer who was suing us because we took too long to restore his guild. But that's the best protection I've ever had from having to deal with customer issues later from miscommunication, because it's all here, it's all in black and white, and it's what we agreed to and under what terms. The next piece of information that I keep in my front counter is for me.
Oh, Doug, can I ask you a question about that?
Sure.
Did you have that? How did you get the number on there? Is that professionally printed, or do you have a way to do that yourself with a printer?
I just do it with Microsoft Publisher. I have this template all pre-printed, and it whenever I go to hit print for the next 100 tickets, it just prints the next batch of these tickets. So where I take that out, where I have that in at my front counter is here. I just have a stack of them at 42, 43, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there are, a whole series. Oh, that's upside down. Well, I print them ahead of time. So they're all there at the front counter. Well, let me put it in the screen. They're all there at the front counter, waiting to be filled out, and they're just in numerical order. If you tilt the camera up, I keep them right here, and that's where I grab for them. So when somebody's coming in and they're the next in line, I just take the one right off the top. When it gets to just be 2 or 3 pages left, I go print another 100, and they just all sit up here. All my paperwork for intake is all up at the front counter, right below the workboard. So this is the next one up, 36,481.
Doug, one more thing. Andrew asks, how do you answer the customer's point blank question? How long is it going to take? So when you put the ASAP in there, and somebody's like, "Hey, man, I'm a working musician. I got a gig in 3 weeks. Can you do it in 3 weeks?" Are you pretty firm on ASAP, or will you will you kind of put your finger to the wind and go, "Oh, you know what? 3 weeks is I could probably do that," or
Yeah, that's something that I work with customers on. So if I got a working musician that says that I've got a gig on a certain date, if I think I can get it done before then, I will. Certainly if it's a customer that we've done lots of other work for. If it's, quite frankly, there are ways that I handle my customer kind of tongue in cheek that sometimes are much more serious than others. Very often, and I get myself into trouble sometimes, and I've developed a little bit of a reputation for being a grouch, that when a customer calls me and says, "I have a Les Paul such and such, whatever year, whatever color," because for some reason that seems to matter to customers when they tell us about their guitars. "Yeah, I have a 1968 Gibson E3 CS 335. It's red," and then they pause, "but it needs a setup, and it needs whatever." They've determined whatever it needs, which is it's uncommonly always the case. But if they've determined in their head that it just needs a setup and a nut and maybe some new pickups, how much and how long? When I get that question, or those two questions, I normally demur from the job, and I'll say to the customer, I don't know that we would be the best fit for you. I think you would be better served by another shop. And very often I'll get, "Huh? What do you mean? I want to bring you my 335. So right, but I just so you're aware, and I said, and I tell them, I'm saying this only partially as a joke, but if your first two questions for me are how much and how long, then we're the wrong shop for you. Because now I know that you're shopping on two factors that are most important to you. How fast can I do it? And you're price sensitive to it. So if your first two questions are how cheap and how fast, I'm really not interested in the job. We've all heard the joke, you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. Pick two. But if your first two questions are fast and cheap, or how fast and how much, then the quality of the job is not even being considered as a factor at that point. And that's a customer I don't particularly want to work with. And we have the luxury at this point of our careers of being able to pick and choose. There was a period of time where we were, working so lean that we didn't really have that choice, and you had to kind of negotiate those waters very carefully. So we'll work with customers to say, oh, I got a particular gig I'd like to have this for. If the first words out of your mouth are, I'm a professional musician and I have to have this guitar for a gig, I'm going to doubt how professional of a musician you are. Because every professional musician I've ever worked with has other guitars that they can play for a gig. So if you'd like it for a particular gig, I can try to work with you. But if you have to have it, then I'm questioning your how much of a pro you are, because every pro I've ever worked with, including myself as a gigging musician, always had another guitar to do a gig with when mine was out of service, or if an accident had happened. So there's a two-way street there. I'll work with musicians when I can, when it works within the framework of the shop, when I can deliver on a promise and not just taking it, say, I hope so. I just had a circumstance where we flew a guitar to Chicago on Monday we shipped a guitar to Chicago on Monday so it can be flown on a plane to London on Wednesday for a truly professional musician who, when they dropped the guitar with us 6 weeks ago, wanted it done in 2 weeks. And I said, I can't do it in 2 weeks. I can't do what you want in 2 weeks and have you have the instrument repaired in such a fashion that you're going to want me to do it. Because they said, well, this is a really important instrument, one of our most important instruments for us on this tour. And, we'd like to be able to have it back for the last night of that tour, which was the 28th of September. And that was when we received it 2 weeks before then. And I said, it's not going to happen. And they said, okay, well, we've got plenty of other instruments in the tour that he can use. Right. I know that because he's a professional musician. A professional musician will always have another guitar if they need one. If they tell me that it's the only guitar they have and can use for a show, then that's somebody who has a gig, one of the 4 gigs they do every year with their band at some event at the Elks Lodge that they're pretending to be rock stars, and this is the only guitar they can possibly use. That tells me that they're not what they're actually saying they are. That's a two-way street, and I might sound a little jaded when I'm talking about it that way, but I don't see this. I've never had a circumstance where a pro told me when I had to have the guitar done by, because all the pros I've ever worked with, and there were a lot of them spanning the entire spectrum, told me, if you can't, I get it. I got another guitar I can play. What's more important to me is that the guitar get done properly, excuse the pun, and done right, But if the first 2 questions for me are how much and how long, then I'd prefer you to be somebody else's customer. That usually winds up with a lot of people saying, you know what, I appreciate that. I still want to bring my guitar to you. Okay, good. But now we can move the conversation to where it's important, which is about the guitar. I don't ever want to be in a position where I have to justify my prices to anybody, because as far as I'm concerned, my prices justify themselves. We talked about pricing last time. I think I saw a question on you want to come back down here? I saw a question on the chat about this legalese business here.
Yes.
This is specific to us because they're terms that we thought a lot about, but they are generic enough that anybody could use them and just apply them to their shop. We can share this with you guys, on the Luth Group website. If maybe if we come in close, if you want to go through them in specifics, I don't know if it's necessary.
Nah.
Yeah. But that's that's that part of it. Pull out just a little bit. This is the second piece of paper that I deal with at the front counter. This is my Bible. This is my rate sheet.
Sorry. Sorry.
Nope. Who's sorry?
I don't know who's sorry.
Hold on a second. I'll find out. Go ahead.
Okay.
Keep going. I'll figure it out.
So this is my rate sheet. As many of you know, I charge an average rate of repair for average repairs. So, what a setup costs. Down here, what I charge for certain aspects of nut work, saddle work, bridge work and the like. You know, I flip it over. I've got, this is neck, fingerboard, and frets. So neck resets, fret work. This is all electronics work here. Down here is structural repairs, and so forth and so such. And I've done a lot of research for us in our shop, what our average for rate of repair is, or our average time of repair. And I would much rather charge an average time of repair than how long an average refret actually takes me for every single refret that comes through the door. I don't want to run a stopwatch at the bench. I don't want to, I don't want to have to explain, you know, if I've given the example very often that a lot of our customers know each other. So yeah, there are some refrets that take 4 hours. There are some refrets that take 6 hours. There are some refrets that take 2 hours. The last thing in the world I want is a customer showing up to somewhere, some over 50 guitar club at Sam Ash, seeing another one of our customers at Sam Ash and saying, yeah, I just had my guitar refretted by Doug Proppers. Oh yeah. Man, I love his work. He's expensive, but he's worth it. What did you have? Would you have done? I did a refret. Oh yeah, he refretted my guitar just a few months ago. Yeah, man, my refret cost $800. Really? My refret only cost $450. So now I've got two customers that hate me. I never want to be in that position. I believe in charging average prices for average repairs. We've gone through that in the pricing talk, so we don't really have to go through that again. But if you looked closely at my rate sheet only has one number on it, and it's right up here. That's our shop hourly rate. Everything else is the amount of time that job is scheduled for. So if I'm doing a refret, if I go to that refret, my billable rate for a refret, you all remember the formula that I went through with the pricing thing, but my billable rate for a refret is at 6 hours. That's what I bill it for. That doesn't mean it always takes me 6 hours. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's less. If I'm doing my job well, most of the time it's less because I want to run a profitable business. But that's the price that gets quoted to the customer. And this way I'm not doing a ton of math. If I write down on my intake form, refret, replace nut, replace saddle, setup, I then can go to my rate sheet and I can put on there, refret 6 hours, replace nut, whatever that is on here, an hour and a half, replace saddle, hour and a half, setup, hour and a half, add them up, total number of hours at my rate sheet, at my shop hourly rate, gives me my number to quote to the customer. One, it makes doing the math painfully easy at the front counter. And two, the benefit of this is I have something, if you want to pull back, I have something standing between me and my customer. This is a rate sheet that I don't publish for public use for my customers. My customers don't get to take this home, but holding up a rate sheet gives me both a plausible deniability that there's something else besides me controlling my rates for those repairs, and it looks very official. And the customer is much more accepting of the fact that, oh, it's on the rate sheet for this, therefore I'm paying that. So I don't have to sit there, tapping my fingers on the guitar and scratching my chin and going, well, it's got a bound fingerboard and the inlays don't look pretty good. It's a really dry guitar and it's a Rickenbacker. And so I think the refret on that would come. When we're doing that, we seem unsure of ourselves. And that's why people don't like to price things in front of the customers, because it's uncomfortable. It makes us feel queasy about, plus, talking money is always uncomfortable to begin with. I'm asking them to pay me and this takes all of that away. I have a rate sheet, it's in front of me. I can point to it and say, well, if we're going to be replacing the saddle, That's 1.5 hours. It goes down for 1.5 hours. Someone can ask me if they want where I arrive at that time, and I say it's the average time it takes for repair, factoring in everything. Oh, and by the way, that factors in my time here when I'm in front of the customer. That's factored into the amount of time for each job. A percentage of each job, probably about 5 to 10% of each job. 5 to 10% of each job is taken in my rate sheet. So that gives me, come back down here. That gives me my plausible deniability, that gives me my certainty in my pricing, and my customers comfortable that I'm not making this up out of whole cloth, that I have some kind of schedule of repairs that I'm doing. I'll be more than happy to share this on the Luth Group website as well. You will have to judge whether or not these hours are within what you would normally do. And of course, you would have to plug in your own hourly shop rate. You know, we charge $140 an hour for the average rate of repairs down here. That may not feel comfortable in your shop. You may feel, in your area for the amount of time you've been in business and so forth and so such, whatever other factors that hourly rate can fluctuate. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed when I said refret, replace nut, replace saddle, setup had a price, a price, a price, and a price. It was denoted in hours. But if I do nothing else as an evangelist within this group and get us out of the habit of doing stupid things like saying, if I'm refretting your guitar, I'll throw in the net and the setup for free. Please start charging a la carte. There's no excuse to charge a price for a refret that includes a nut, that includes a setup, unless you've done the math to do so. Because if you're charging $400 for a customer's refret, that you're including a nut, a saddle, and a setup, that means you're penalizing the customer who came in for a setup and a nut, because they get to pay full boat, but the guy who's getting a refret somehow is getting free work. We're not doing ourselves favors by doing this. That's letting customers set our rate sheets for us as opposed to the other way around. I've never been to an auto shop that said, oh, we're putting brakes in your car. You want a muffler with that? It's never happened. Last bit of paperwork before we go to Dan is this. I have these at the front counter. Come down a little bit. I use these. These are basically from the internet in various different places. There you go.
Internet, eh?
The internet. This, I believe, was from, I think these are from, whose books are these from? These are from Irving Sloane's books, I think. But there's that one. There's a classical guitar one. This, I believe, comes from Dan Earlywine's book. I don't remember where this one comes from. I know Bo Hannum has a bunch of these. I think this one also comes from Dan Earlywine's book. There's a Telecaster. There's a 335. That might be a Dan Earlywine thing too. Here's a Les Paul I got from somewhere. An offset guitar, mandolin, and then uke. So all of these aid me in when I'm examining a guitar. We'll see that a little bit later. But I use these if I have a guitar customer that comes with a Les Paul. This comes out along with this, and those are the two pieces of paper I'm working. This allows me to mark anywhere. If I flip the guitar over and I see a bunch of belt buckle rash, I can note that down here that it's there. Or if there's a scratch or a gouge in the guitar, that'll help me keep a record of it. If I have any kind of acoustic guitar where if I have any kind of structural repairs to do that I'm discussing with the customer, I think somebody's
I got it. Keep going.
So, you know, if I have a customer come in that has whatever going on with their guitar, if they have a crack running next to the pick guard, down from here to the end block, another crack running from there, I can mark those cracks right on my sheet, highlight them for the customer and myself. And this way, when I'm going back to work on the guitar weeks later, or I'm handing the guitar to Sharon to do these repairs, she doesn't have to go find them. If I have a loose finger brace here, a loose finger brace there, a loose X brace here, 2 tone bars loose, or whatever number of back braces that are loose, all of these can easily get marked. I can put whatever notes I want on them. I can make notes about whatever is going on with the frets or anything like that, or if I've got a separated heel block or anything that's going on with the guitar that I find during my examination. This can get easily marked. It gets attached to this. This gets photocopied to give their customer their customer copy to the customer, which is usually yellow, we've chosen. That also serves as being their claim ticket. I don't think I have any up here. But that serves as being their claim ticket for when they pick up the guitar, for them to turn in and read and you know, get their guitar back. I don't release guitars without claim tickets. And if, you know, if necessary, I can photocopy that for them, but that's mostly for our use. And to make any notes about the guitar, those get stapled together. They go on my desk, and it gets attached to the guitar case, and a copy goes to my desk for me to be able to create a work order. Yeah. To create a work order for the customer. Sharon's grabbing one at the moment. The work order goes in a book that's in the shop that I can, either of us can easily reference and always see what's going to happen to a guitar. Just grab the work order book.
Unfortunately, we don't have the yellow claim tickets.
Right, of course not. Why would we?
If somebody brings in 5 guitars, Doug, do they get 5 numerical order forms?
I don't know about Doug's, but mine do.
Yeah,
Who said that?
can you hear me?
Yep.
Me, Luke.
Yeah. So if somebody comes in with 5 guitars, there's a separate work order. There's a separate ticket for each guitar. You know, so if somebody does come in with 5 guitars, we're going to be here for a while because I'm going to examine each guitar. Each guitar gets a separate ticket, a separate diagram depending on what guitar it is. If it's a customer that has, you know, a Martin and then a 335, each one, and what different one comes out for each guitar. When I type them into the computer in the form of a work order and what will become their invoice, it's in a printed form like this off of QuickBooks. This has a listing of every repair that's done. It takes less time to do this than you would think because this is all auto-filled. Plugs in the price here automatically because my rate sheet is already programmed into the computer. Comes down here, there's the total price, it adds the tax. And this remains in this book. These are the book of work orders that are on the benches that are at our main bench for us to, that's the wrong book. You know, so these are the work orders for currently. I can flip to whatever guitars in process. We can see here all the stuff that is on there. Sharon can mark it in such a way that she can mark when each one is done. This here, we yellow out each part of the job when it's complete. Oh. You know, we mark everything here when it's complete. And so we can see exactly at a glance what's left to do. She can make notes for whatever I need to be aware of. And, you know, each guitar has one of those, you know, that's the work order book. You know, that's our entire process for doing things at the front counter. Explaining it takes a lot longer to do it than it takes a lot longer to explain it than it does to do it. But that's how we keep a process by which we never miss something at the front counter, that we always wind up making sure we're aware of everything that's going on with a guitar, that we don't wind up missing something and regretting it later. The customer's not ill-informed as to what's going on with their guitar. They have a good idea. They can make a decision or not. A lot of times the customer will have all of this done and they'll say, you know what, it's probably more than I really wanted to get into with this guitar. So, can we, I need some time to think about it. I say, fine. Then this gets scooped up. It gets stapled together and it goes in a pending pile that I keep at the front counter. You can come back to the other camera if you want, Ian.
Would 5 guitars equal 5 evaluation fees as well?
Well, yes. I have kind of a rule of thumb that, and it says right in the first paragraph or second paragraph, that we charge an evaluation fee for each instrument. If you leave that instrument with us for repair, that evaluation fee is absorbed into the cost of the repair. Because I've set my rates in such a way that my time at the front counter is paid for within the repair. I have, for example, here on my rate sheet, if I just look up the simplest form of repair that we do, which is, I guess, would be a setup. I have on my rate sheet 1.5 hours. It doesn't take me an hour and a half to do a setup. But I'm also a business person. So when I'm taking in your guitar, when we log it in and store it, and it rides our insurance on our in our storage room behind the front counter here, when I go sit behind my computer to generate my work order, when we pull the guitar out to get it worked on, take the strings off it, take all the parts off of it, put it in a customer's parts box, label the customer's parts box, put that with the parts, clean up the guitar, get it ready for a setup and get it ready for strings. Then the guitar is set up, we put strings on it, we'd make all of our adjustments, we brighten up the guitar, we polish it or we buff it or whatever's going to be involved with, spray out the electronics, do the whole complete setup. Then it's done. It doesn't take an hour and a half to do all of that because there's also a healthy portion of time built into that estimate, that number, to account for profit. The faster I get to do a setup, the more money I make on that job. The longer it takes me, if you get into some of those setups where you start pulling your hair out because you've got to change out all sorts of screws and you got stripped holes and you got when you're trying to put the guitar back together, and it starts to be a persnickety patient where it's like every tuner is like, has to be lubricated and full. You got to take the thing apart. You got the old tuners, you got to take the cover off, and you got to get the worm gear, and you got to get the cog gear, and those sometimes might take a good period of time to do, but on average, most of them are going for much faster than what we're charging them for. So we have not only our consultation time built in for each instrument that's left with us, so that gets absorbed by the repair costs. The evaluation fee, if a customer says no to me at the front counter, says, I'm really not prepared to do that on this instrument, I didn't know it needed all of that, so I don't want to leave it with you. Or if they say, I really have to think about it, can I get back to you? Okay, fine. This goes, as we had mentioned before, in a pending pile, and I can leave it in a pending pile, and if they don't call me back after a period of time, I just run it through the shredder. That saves me from having to examine it again. If they call me up 6 weeks later and say, you know what, I want to bring my Martin back in and have you do all of that work we talked about. Oh, okay, I can just pull it out of the pending folder, and I've already examined the guitar. There's nothing else that needs to be done. We just need to have them sign the paperwork and intake the guitar. If a customer takes a guitar away from my shop, I actually don't charge an evaluation fee for that. When I do charge an evaluation fee is when the customer says, yeah, I want you to do it. Then they sign this. I take the repair in. We do all sorts of back office work on it. It's riding on our insurance. I sit behind the computer, type up a work order. It gets scheduled in the book. The instrument goes out to get prepped to be put on the benches. Then I get a phone call that says, Doug, I thought about it, and I really don't think I want to go ahead with that repair. I say, okay, that's fine. You don't have to. That's fine. You can come pick it up. We'll schedule you for an appointment to come pick it up. When you come pick it up, by the way, and I'll email you the invoice, there is a service charge for the evaluation. We do charge an evaluation fee for instruments returned unrepaired. And sometimes customers don't like that, but if they don't like that, they can go do business elsewhere. So that's how I deal with the evaluation fee. But yes, if there are 5 instruments that come in, there are 5 evaluation fees. If they only want to leave me one of the 5, it works itself out in the wash as far as I'm concerned.
What if somebody does the classic move of "I've got a guitar I want you to look at," and you say sure, and then they bring 5 guitars instead of the one that you're assuming? Do you
That's
do that?
difficult. It depends on, because if I don't have the time, if we've scheduled them for an appointment for only about enough time to look at one guitar, we're gonna have to talk about it. But you try to flesh that out on the phone or by email first. They say, okay, we got you down for such and such an appointment for you to bring in your Les Paul. Well, I might want to bring in my Martin and my Kentucky banjo too, or my whatever, And I say, well, okay, if you want to bring in 3, we need to adjust the length of your appointment, because if I book you for a 3 o'clock appointment and I got somebody else coming in at 3:30, we're going to have a problem. So that's easy enough to take care of over the phone. If they say they're only bringing in 1 guitar and you've made that clear, and then they show up with 5, they're going to have to bring 4 of them home.
Do you have a rough idea of like what each type of instrument is going to take you in terms of an inspection?
I try to get through the inspection as quickly as possible. In an ideal situation, I would be able to get through the inspection within a 30-minute period.
No matter the type of instrument, like if somebody brought in a crazy Martin restoration versus
Well, I think going into that, you kind of know what you're going to be dealing with, so you set aside the time for it. Plus, my attitude is that if I know that that's what I'm in for, that somebody's bringing in a guitar that's a high dollar guitar that is, had suspect repairs done to it, or it's been just sitting in the attic forever, or it's going to be one of those kind of, basket case Martins or something like that. Then I know I'll need to set my next appointment much farther away from it, and I'll leave space for that to be in there. I'm also in most cases, reasonably sure whether or not I'm dealing with a customer who's actually going to leave it. If I suspect when the customer's coming in that it's a customer that's like, oh, I want you to look at my, the Martin I inherited from my grandpapa, and it's been sitting in the attic forever, and they really haven't been playing guitar for that long, and they're maybe expecting a $200 to $500 repair bill. Well, we'll get that out of the way first and foremost, saying that you've got a guitar that's a pretty sick guitar here, and it's going to be a pretty high repair bill. This is not just getting your brakes done kind of thing. Then the conversation can start there, and I'm factoring in, knowing that the invoice might be, thousands of dollars versus hundreds of dollars, also compensates me for that extra front counter time. So I'm happy to spend it, because if I wind up having a repair that's on my bench that it's going to be, there's a reasonable expectation that they would leave it, and it's a $6,500 repair. Remember, my laundry list of repairs is all a la carte, and in each a la carte repair is a small percentage of time that had been allowed for at the front counter already. So that $6,500 repair will have, plenty of room in it for taking the time to do the examination.
Awesome.
Dan, where'd Dan go? Here he is.
Dan Earlywine.
Sorry to monopolize the time, but you do things much differently than I do.
Got you, Dan.
Testing.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I do things differently. I sure do. And
Let's talk.
that's
Let's talk about that because I'm curious about how that works.
I think everything that you've said is right on, and it's good for everybody that's listening to you, and including myself. But I haven't really been in the repair business as my sole sense of living since I went to Stu Mac. I've always done it at the same time, and remarkably quite a bit of work considering I had a full-time job. But it's different when you have a shop that's your only income. And in that terms, I'm different than you are. But as far as taking in jobs, if I send you that list of my thoughts, and I can run through
Sure.
that because I stand behind that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I want to do that.
Well, first of all, I don't get much walk-in business, and I haven't for years. I get a lot of drive-in business, but it's every time someone comes here, it's an appointment. And I like to do it on email. If somebody calls me on the phone, I try to get off the phone as quick as I can, because sometimes they'll say the same thing over 3 times on a 20-minute phone call. And as you know how it's hard to get off, and I'll get off as fast and say, Sam, do you have, a lot of people don't have email and they don't have text, but most of them do. And
Right.
I have people email me your thoughts, then I'm in better control of the situation. If somebody does come to the shop, it's an appointment. And I even tell them before they're driving here from wherever they're coming, that we can't spend a lot of time when they're here. It's going to be dropping the guitar off. We'll take a look at the instrument and get the basic idea of what they think's wrong. But I'm not going to spend an hour going through a guitar. And they know that before they come, so they don't worry about it. There's people that come that you like them so much and they're such special people, or the guitar is so special that you spend 3 hours with them and take them down to Stu Mac and give them the grand tour. I do a lot of that sort of thing. Whenever the guitar does come in, I like to get a description of what they think's wrong, and I like to get them to sit down and play something for me if I can, so I can kind of gauge how good a player they are. And then they can show me if it's a buzz or it's this, they can show me where the noise is. What I like to do is have them leave and I email them a very careful estimate. So I can do that on my own.
I want you to pause there for a minute, Dan. So when somebody brings in a guitar and says, "Yeah, I have this horrible buzz on my guitar," and you had mentioned you have a customer play the guitar for you, I will on occasion as well, especially if I have a customer that's complaining about the guitar's doing something.
Hey guys, 22
that it
Plankster here.
shouldn't.
It was brought
And
to my
if
attention
if
last
I
week
can't
that
make it
I was
do
about
what
to hit.
it is they're doing, I'll hand them the guitar and say, "Play this for me." You, as a routine, will have the customer always play it for you. But when you have a customer who sits down with a guitar, how do you deal with a customer where, they say, "Oh, my guitar's buzzing," and I really feel like saying, "No, you're buzzing"? How do you handle that conversation?
Now, they really feel like what?
Well, if they say, "Oh,
Chipotle's
my
carne
guitar's
asada
buzzing,"
is
and
back.
you have them play the guitar, and it turns out it's them that's buzzing rather than the guitar, meaning their technique is causing them issues. How do you deal with that conversation?
I find a comfortable way to tell them that it's really their problem in the way they're playing it. And a lot of times they'll accept that just because I'll play it or Blake will play it, and we'll say, "Really, look at this. This isn't your problem. It's where you're putting your finger."
Okay.
But most of my problems aren't even fret buzzes, because most of the work we seem to get anymore are basket cases or big jobs
Hmm.
that require a good deal of time of an inspecting. And I'm looking through a list here.
You want me to,
As far as customer relations, that's the important thing that you and I both agreed on. Taking the guitar in and making a customer feel very comfortable is very important. So whenever I can, I like to find something I really like about the guitar and let them know that said, this is great. It makes them comfortable, and then they're relaxed and you can start talking about money. That's the sales part of it.
Hmm.
I like to look the guitar over carefully from the outside to look for any marks that are there that you'll get blamed for later. I
And how
don't
do you
so
deal with
much
that?
like
Do you point those out to the customer when you see them?
Sure.
Okay.
And if they send it in, I'll take photos of it
Okay.
just to prove that this mark was here and that was there. If I can get somebody out when they're here in 20 minutes, I'd be happy. And that is built into the charges. I don't have a price list like you do, but in my mind, I know the amount of time I'm taking to take the job in, and that gets added in at some point.
Right.
Yep, I just don't have as much to say about it as you do.
So once you've taken the instrument in and the customer's left you with a guitar, you're doing your evaluation post your interaction with the customer. You're doing it later.
I'll do it later, even
Okay.
if they're driving to town, which you get a lot probably, and I do,
Hmm.
Cincinnati and Columbus and Dayton. I let them know that I can't fix it while they're here, no matter what it is, because I'm
Yeah.
not that kind of store. We
I
don't change.
affectionately say that we closed our drive-up repair window years ago.
We don't change strings and change tuners or do hardly anything
Right.
unless it's for a special friend
Hmm.
or someone that there's people that'll show up at the door that we never knew were coming, but they might have something so interesting that then it's okay. But
So do you get people dropping off guitars unannounced?
sure,
Oh wow. Okay.
not very often, but it's a small town. You've been to Athens, and
Sure.
it's it's kind of a country place.
Right.
And if you get the word out about this guy does guitars, people just show up. It's amazing. That's both good and bad. Sometimes you'll get a remarkable guitar that comes in that you would never have seen in your life,
Yeah. Well, I mean, surprise visits are only fun sometimes, though.
or ones that you can buy
Yeah, that's
and
true.
own,
That's true too.
or turn around and sell it and make a profit for being there and knowing all about it.
Oh, if I see
Ask me some
anybody
more.
coming up the back stairs with a birthday cake, I'll warn you about
Ask me some more questions.
it. So when you take it in, what is your system for paperwork then? How are you dealing with that? So you got an
I put a
estimate.
tag on the case, phone number, text, email, and I write down needs so and so on just on a plain old cardboard case ticket. And then I go through it with a fine tooth comb and send it to Joan. And she puts it in her book. She likes to know whatever comes in and then goes into her QuickBooks. So when it's time to send out, she already has the address and all that sort of thing.
And you're able to generate an invoice through
And then
QuickBooks.
she generates an invoice. It's tentative.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it looks, I can, if you can screen share, I could bring one up even.
Sure.
Yeah. Screen share me.
I think you hit screen share down there.
Okay. Here we go. So we send this out. And Joan takes care of all the business of this, any money. All I need to have is phone numbers and addresses and names. Something like this could go out after the job's done, or it might go out as an estimate, in which case it wouldn't have shipping on it. But I don't have prices. Every job's different. I don't have a price list. I used to. I've tried it, but I'm just, as you've been here, man, I'm just not organized enough.
Well, you saw our pricing episode of the Business Talk.
The what?
You saw the pricing episode of our Business Talk, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because I'm looking at these prices. You might have to watch that again.
The what now?
I said
that
I'm looking
the-
at these prices. You might have to watch that episode again.
It looks like the prices for the doctor on Little House on the Prairie. Dan, raise your prices.
Yes, Dan, raised your prices.
That's just one job that might have been totally done by Blake,
Okay.
Okay.
and I'm doing something else. And he got paid well. How do I unshare now?
I can unshare for you. Hold on one second.
Can't see the main screen.
Here we go.
If I said I could make $100 an hour, that never seems to work out for me. Sometimes I might make $150 an hour. But I'd rather just look at how many hours it took me and then think, what's that worth per hour in this job? And that's how I bill. I can bring up there's some bills I could bring up that are probably considered way too much to charge.
So what I would like to know is, how do you deal with, you get a lot of jobs that when somebody drops it off, it's the kind of job that sometimes you don't even know how you're going to do it when it comes in, because it's one of these, types of jobs that have
Most
so
of-
many factors to it.
Most of what I get is that kind of job.
Yeah, so
We do ordinary fret jobs and nuts and stuff like that, but my shop really is more the weirdest jobs in the world that are hard to do, and it's a challenge for every one of them. And I'll get stories for vintage guitar out of it. I learn something and have fun doing it.
So
And
how do you deal with pricing something that you don't even know where the end of the job lies?
in that case, I'll generally give a really high estimate, say it won't go over $5,000.
Okay.
And I'll say, and it probably won't be less than 1,800.
Okay, that's a pretty big ballpark.
But I can work within that, and people agree to it.
Okay, that works. So if you're not sure of what the end of the job is because you've got so many unknown variables, you just throw out a big high number and says, I can keep it under that.
Yes, and that's the kind of job that mostly we take in. That's what comes my way, things that nobody else wants to fix.
Okay.
Other shops turn it away, and I'll go, yeah, I'll do that. But it's also because I want to see the guitar.
Right.
I mean, that's another whole part. If you're able to do it financially, and you can do something that maybe at a price that you couldn't make a living at, but I could. Plus, I'm 79 years old and going out of the game. At this point in my life, I'm enjoying doing the weirdest things that other people wouldn't do.
Sure.
It's for the fun of it. I keep track of any parts, and I'll make money on parts. Not much. It's not a big deal to me. I'll just put strings. I charge $7 for a set of strings. I know I probably only pay $3. I don't, if it's a bone nut, if I'll bone blank, I'll probably write bone, $7. And that's probably way less than we paid for the ones out of India, or I paid out of anywhere else.
Yeah, I think the ones we paid out in India were less than $1 when we were doing that big order. So you separate out your cost of materials on the invoices as well.
I have parts, cost of material, fret wire, I charge probably, I think these days I'm paying them 10 or 12 bucks for a set of fret wire, probably. What do you charge for a set of fret wire?
I'd have to, if I'll charge 3 pieces. I
Three
think
lengths.
yeah, three 2-foot lengths. I'll charge. I think it's on my work order for. Do I have one here? $17.70. That's
Then
6 feet.
I should raise the price.
Yeah, I charge it 6 feet at $2.95 per foot.
But of course, I get stuff like that at quite a discount from Stu Mac, and they still honor that even though I'm retired.
Oh, that's good.
So
That's good. Yeah, well,
everything, all the parts I can buy from Stu Mac have a built-in discount for me,
sure.
which is
I would have
nice.
figured you were you using stuff that fell off the back of the truck.
Sometimes I do.
Huh? Oh, look at this.
And I have 2 or 3 people that work here part-time, and they all get paid a different rate because actually when you look at it, they're learning while they're here, and they all know it. That's Elise right now, and Blake. Blake's becoming very good to have, but I can't get him as much as I want him.
Is it becoming high demand?
He's just he's got a great girlfriend, and he's in a band that he loves, and he's a very good player, and I think one of these days he's going to be off playing. Their band seems to be going somewhere. Blake
Okay.
he'll drive to Nashville and play over the weekend and come back up here and work like on a Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. So I'm going to lose him one of these months. But he's been with me long enough that he's helped me dig out through a whole lot of stuff that was left after COVID.
Okay.
And ask me some questions.
Well, I think I want to have Ian join us in the conversation because he's got some opinions about this as well. And then we're gonna look at the examination of a guitar. So I want Ian to join us in the. If you want to pin yourself in this as well, Ian.
Yeah. So my opinions are essentially kind of speculation at this point because a lot like Dan, I'm not really like a full-time repair guy anymore, but I did have some observations thinking about if it comes up that happens again, like how I would change things. And I also was brought up in shops that did on the spot evaluations to take in, not through doing scheduled, just like anybody that walked in would do it. And that was just kind of how I was raised. And there's some things about it for me personally, just for personality style, like don't work for me. One is I find, being in a room with another person that I don't know incredibly distracting. I don't know if it's a social anxiety or something, but it just takes me out of the game, like to have to sit there and pick up on social cues while I'm trying to evaluate a guitar.
So you're putting that pressure on yourself for the awkwardness of the interaction, and you're feeling that that's distracting you from finding everything that's here.
Yeah, I feel like when I have somebody standing there, in some ways I'm fighting the urge to empathize with them. I'm fighting the urge to, wonder, do this little dance about, like, can they afford this? Or boy, would I want to hear that was going to be $3,000 or, any of that stuff. Like for me, I think ultimately it would probably be easier for me to take the feelings of the customer out of the equation just by taking the customer standing in front of me out of the equation.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and I remember Dan had mentioned something that to me that he has I don't know if he called it anxiety or not, but he has the same difficulties in talking money with people he doesn't know.
Well,
Yeah.
for me, I started at 18 and
Can you
her
pin, can
payments
you
for
pin
years.
Dan in there too?
Oh, yeah. 1 second. I wanted to,
Go ahead, Dan, you were saying?
I have done customer evaluations forever and ever and ever, and it's always been uncomfortable. That's not even before I had my own business. And businesses, I've been in business and out of business and back in business a couple of times in my life. And I'm just not really good with talking money when the person is standing there in the room with unless, like Ian says, unless I know the person. And it's really becomes very easy for me to start saying, well, I'll just do that for you. And I can talk myself out of money real easily.
Mhm.
Just in my blood. And I have
Hey.
learned a whole bunch about charging money from the last 3 years of the Luthalon. And when Ian says he's got some ideas how he might change things differently, I do too, but I won't be doing it because it's too late for me to start from the ground up. But
yeah,
the information that's coming out on the Luth group is killer for all the younger people starting into it. Don't do what I did.
So when you mention, Ian, when you mention that you have ideas about how you would do things differently than you had been, what are those?
well, the other thing that I would say is, I might do them very similar to you if I had the space to have a dedicated check-in bench. And I think that's a big thing too. It takes me, with the space that I have, in order to prepare for a customer to come over, I just have to I have to case things up. I have to take things upstairs. I don't know if I told you, but I had an incident where I'm pretty sure a customer stole a switch tip off of another guitar.
Really?
For whatever reason, I had 252s in, and I think I went to the bathroom and I was just like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom, and went to the bathroom. I think the dude actually took a switch tip, and either that or the other dude was lying to me. I don't know what it is, but now just as a rule of thumb, I don't have any guitars laying around, and there's no separate room for me to have customers into, so they're in the shop essentially. And I think that's, for a lot of people, that's the reality of it, is the customer's going to be in the shop with them, and they're going to have to clean off their bench, and it's just essentially what I have to do is I have to turn my shop into your check-in area when customers come over.
Well, I can to speak to that. And I know when you see our reception area, and it is a luxury to have.
Mhm.
But there were times where we were in a 600 square foot shop or 450 square foot shop. The first couple of shops we had were much smaller shops before we got into bigger shops, and even when we were luthing out of the house. But when we were in our first, one of our first shops, when we moved in, we didn't have a room where you could have for reception. We added one later. There was a lawyer next to us who had gone out. We took over their space and knocked through the wall, and put a door in. But before that, you would come in and you were in the shop. And we felt so strongly about having that place to have an interaction that we gave up the space out of the shop, and we physically didn't have the separate space. So I built with countertops. I built a kind of a trapezoid shaped counter that was a barrier to keep the customer from walking into the shop, because the last thing I ever wanted, it was impossible when you were having a customer come into a shop where there are guitars around, because most people don't think. Then they look with their hands. They don't look with their eyes. You almost feel like you have to be somebody's mother and say, look with your eyes, not with your hands, because somebody will go in, oh, this is a really cool guitar. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was wet. With what they don't know. So if it's within their reach, we wanted to keep us away from that, and we built a countertop, that was inside the doorway to the shop. That was a complete annoyance to us, because you had to traverse it to get into the shop. We had kind of a drawbridge countertop at the end of it, so we had two sides and then a top to it where the guitar was. where there was a kind of a drawbridge kind of countertop that came down that I could lift up to walk in and out of. But when we were expecting a customer, that came down. They couldn't get past it. It served as a barrier, and it served as the area for our intake. There were times where our intake area kind of had a little curtain so that they couldn't see the shop necessarily from where they were standing. We did all sorts of crazy things in early shops that prevented customers from coming into the shop, and it also created that customer space that we could decorate in whatever fashion we could get away with.
Mhm.
And then as we grew and as we started renting shop space out of the house, we segregated an area for that customer service interaction, or we would dedicate a room to it. And then of course, when as we grew to where we are now, where we have as much space as we want to be able to dedicate to that. But it's a fair amount of square footage just to dedicate to the customer service experience. But we've always had some area just to do just that. That when I didn't have customers, they could double as an extra bench if I needed an extra space to work.
Well, I think that what you do provide is a customer service experience, and I think if you feel like that's part of what like allows you to charge what you charge or whatever, then and you think it's important, I think that's totally valuable and totally legitimate. For me personally, it winds up being just not an effective way for me to bid. And
so you prefer to do it. You prefer to have basically the interaction with the customer to be a very quick handoff, like Dan.
Well, I mean, ideally, the thing is though, is I'm like Dan, and so there's two ways that it can go. It can go uncomfortable and kind of nerve wracking, or it can go, hey, I like this guy, and next thing I know, I've talked to him for an hour and a half about football in Georgia or some dumb stuff. So there's really no winning for me with the customer standing there. And
Amen. That's me too.
And so I think, honestly, and the other thing that occurs to me is we're the only, like, when I think of things that are similar about this, we're really the only, trade that really does business like this. Maybe not, I don't know, like we got bids for a roof, everybody was like, came out, did measurements, and then called us later to tell us what the bids were. When you take your car to the mechanic, they don't like open the hood right there in front of you and start going through it and looking at it and trying to tell you what's going to go on with it. I think that also, like, it's the type of thing where I would maybe measure this once again against the type of jobs that are being done. Like for me, a lot like Dan, I take on jobs that, even if I bid it and I say, like Dan says, where it's going to be anywhere between $1,800 and $5,000, that guitar might sit around for 2 weeks before I have concocted a plan of attack.
Right.
So if we're just talking about a refret on a R9 Les Paul or something like that, like I don't think it takes 2 weeks to figure out how you're going to go about it if it's a standard refret. But on those projects that do take that amount of time, but I think like still there's an inspection process on an R9 refret. So like where's the truss rod at? Where's all this stuff at? And it's one of those things, like, once again, like it's always coming up that when I've got the customer there and I'm trying to razzle dazzle and inspect at the same time, I wind up forgetting stuff, or I overlook stuff or whatever. And for me, it's very clear that it's some kind of issue with me and being in a social circumstance and trying to do my job at the same time. That is just
I think
too much information.
I've never had enough space to have an empty room like that. But when I look around my shop today, if I was starting over in this shop, there'd be plenty of room to make a little spot that would separate all of this from the front door.
The
And
one
it's a-
thing,
It's a good thing if you could do it, but I'd have to hire somebody to be there and take care of that.
the one thing I'd say about what I'm kind of speculating how I do it in the future is that there definitely needs to be a, you know, like if somebody comes in with a guitar and they're like you know, like it's making a weird noise or whatever, you know, a lot of times I'm like, you know, make the, I say it all the time, make the thing do the thing that you don't like, and I'll just hand them the guitar and set them down and, you know, make it do the thing. And that's part of it, you know, like you have to have that information. You
Right.
can't just like hand them a claim ticket at the door, take in the guitar, and then, well, I mean, now with Zoom and everything, like it becomes more feasible that you could do that potentially, but
Right.
probably not. Probably there's still going to be a component where you have to make it, you know, make the noise that they don't like or whatever. So but I probably, like moving forward, if I was going to open the shop and do all comers again, I probably wouldn't bid at point of entry anymore, just for my own personal
So
sanity.
you would take the instrument in, do the full evaluation within a given period of time after they've dropped it,
Yep,
send them an email, let
send them
them
an
react
email.
by email, do whatever you have to do back and forth with emails to whatever extent that you're willing to put up with,
There's that
and either come to a point where you either approve the transaction or to have them come and pick it up and take it away.
there's and you know what, one of the things about it too is like everybody is always dropping off or doing something during, you know, during working hours, and there's a lot of you know, reasons why I would rush through that. The other thing too about emailing people is my penmanship, because of emails, has gone to trash. When I fill out forms, it's often like largely illegible. If I'm writing an email to somebody, I've got my, you know, like already I've got my invoice, I've got my, you know, proof of receipt, I've got all of that stuff, you know, in the email to start off with. Like for me, that becomes like something that's searchable.
Yeah,
Like I can go into my email and search for it and find it very easy. You know, it's not like a scrap of paper or you know, one of those little hang tags that goes along with the guitar that, you know, the string breaks or, you know, something like that. You know,
yeah.
it also winds up being something I can print out and I can stick in a bag of parts.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know, you know, I would have to think about it. I think like,
But what I will say is, I think what the takeaway from all of this is that anybody who's coming up, who's deciding on altering the way they do their intake or refining the way they do their intake, my best advice would be to have a system by which you're going to do it the same way every time, and then have that and modify that system so A, it protects you when communication falls apart with the customer, or B, you're not um, leaving either money on the table or having to do repairs for free. You know, when we look at all of that stuff that I was holding up before, and all of these forms we can post on the Luth Group website. But when we look at all of these things that we were doing with rate sheets, intake cards, the guitar diagrams, and all of this stuff, that didn't just appear one day. That came from years of interaction with customers saying, we have to change this because we keep having this problem, that kind of thing. All those little procedures that we come up with is kind of my reaction to all of those things that you guys are saying about how to control the interaction with the customer. Because my goal personally with me is that I hate taking guitars in that I don't know if I'm going to be working on them. That's something that always drove me crazy, because then you have a customer that has to come back and get it. And I always hated that. If I'm not working on the guitar, I would rather you take it home right now. So this way, when that door closes, we're done. I can go back to work. I don't have to worry about storing the guitar. I don't want to have to worry about the customer. And on the few occasions that I've done it, and especially when you get some of those customers that just, they open the door and you can feel them under your skin.
Uh,
They'll come to pick up the guitar that they left with you to examine. They didn't like your price. They didn't like your estimate. They didn't like your evaluation. They didn't like the fact that you said that this guitar needs a neck reset and I'm not going to work on it unless I get to do a neck reset. And they said, well, that's okay, just set it up. I'm sure it'll be fine. Whatever the circumstances are, that type of customer will then come to pick up the guitar, open the case, even though I haven't done anything to it, I've just evaluated it. They want to take the guitar out and try it. Or they want to take it out and examine it like it's the Hope Diamond, to make sure that there wasn't a single solitary, flaw that I might have put in the guitar while it was in my care. So it's the kind of thing where for customers that I'm not going to be continuing a relationship with, for me personally, I want to end that relationship at the first interaction.
I mean, just as a for instance, that's where I would just meet somebody at the door with the guitar. Like I just wouldn't even invite them
Right,
if they're
exactly.
not gonna have work done. But
Yeah, I can
I
see
mean,
that.
I could see that as being rude. Like once again, I think like if you've got the ability to deal with people one-on-one and have it have those barriers up. For you, I think one of the interesting things is you've operated in Westchester, New York your entire life. And
4 years.
And for a lot of people around the country, the people that you deal with would be, to deal with them for what you're dealing with for a year would be immersion therapy. Like the people around here are just different. Like, and a lot of them are really great. Like 2/3 of them are great. And 1/3 of them is the type of person that I would have dealt with 2 or 3 times in a career in Oregon. Like
Right.
the person, the emotional manipulator, the people that are, like no matter what you do, they're not happy. They're out. They're basically out to, make other people miserable.
Well,
But in my experience, that's 1/3 of the people of the Northeast.
I think
I
think that
exaggerating, but
I think Sharon says 2/3. I think from my perspective, everything, when you examine our reception area, everything is there for a reason, even down to the littlest gotchki put somewhere.
yeah.
If just for as an example, when we pull back and I look down here, that bench is there for a reason. It's
Mhm.
not just to hold a guitar. I could put that anywhere in the room,
Mhm.
but it's there that once a guitar case is on it,
Mhm.
I don't get too close to the customer.
Yeah, there you go.
And so it's there for a reason. All of that over years was sought out. It was thought out. I have this here so I can be discussing things with a customer. And if I'm talking about having to do a bridge plate where I need to draw that out and show them how it works with their bridge and their bridge pins and strings, saddles and all of that, that's all there. And they're over here. So everything's in such a way. There are times where those boundaries are stepped past. I remember it was the day before in Westchester that they announced that all non-essential businesses were closing because of COVID, and COVID was on everybody's mind. And I had a customer come in to drop off a guitar, and I was over here drawing something for him, and then suddenly I felt this warm breath on the back of my neck because he decided to come from behind the counter all the way over to here because he wanted to see it really up close and personal. And here's this guy's breathing on the back of my neck. But my perspective is that I'm trying to control the customer interactions the best I can.
Yeah.
But there's still 2 facts that remain. First of all, almost all of our customers are musicians. So right off the bat, we're dealing with, the more creative, crazy percentage of the population to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the 2% rule, which means that at any given time in the population of any country, especially the United States, there's at least 2% of the population that's walking around that should probably be institutionalized in one form or fashion to begin with. So they're going to be in your customer base, whether you like it or not, to some degree. So, you know, the set of procedures that we've come up with have been evolving over time to be able to control circumstances so that I can deal with those uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable to talk to people about money. That's where my rate sheet had come up with, or had come from. And, you know, the concepts behind developing a rate that was self-explanatory, that also is based on a system by which, you know, I price things for the purposes of being able to A, keep my business open first, B, pay ourselves, and C, profit. We did all of that in the pricing episode. You know, all of those have to do with solving those kind of customer interaction problems, you know, and they've been added as time goes on. Just a very, very quick little story about this. This is our intake form. This, when it gets filled out, gets folded in half. You have them? Gets folded in half and gets hung on the guitar case. That's also our case tag. Has all the customer's information on it. It's got all of his approval on it. What I used to do was I have just in the back room here, I have a copy machine that once it's filled out, once the customer sign it, I put it down on the copy machine, make a copy in a yellow card stock, and I fold that in half. I hand it to the customer, and they have their claim ticket for the guitar. And I remember explaining to somebody, a friend of mine who is also a customer, Rory Pazinski, fabulous guy, businessman, great character. And he was coming in to drop off a guitar. I was with another customer, and this is back in the day where we had employees. And so what I used to do was I would fill this out, you know, make a copy, give the customer their copy, and this would go, when we were in that shop, right behind the front counter was where the office was. So I would then go in the office and I would put this on my inbox on my desk. And then at the end of the day, after our customer service hours were over, I would go sit behind my desk, pour myself a cup of coffee, sit down, and I would go through all of the tickets that came in that day. I would type them up on QuickBooks. I would generate my work order. And then one of the techs or one of the shop hands that were working for us at the time, I'd call them into my office and I'd hand them the two stacks. Here's the work orders and here's the tags. He would give the tags to Sharon, and then he would take the work orders, fold them, punch a hole in them, put the string on it, and go and find those cases that were in a little pile in the reception area and put them on the appropriate tags. I'd put the tags on the appropriate cases. So he would look at it, okay, this is a Martin serial number such and such. He would find this guitar, put it on the case, close the case, go to the next work order, find the guitar, put it on the case. That usually worked just fine, but occasionally it wouldn't. And once in a while, we would open up a guitar, and I think once we actually had a situation where the guitar was coming out from the storage room to be worked on, looked at the tag, okay, we got a Les Paul custom, nut, refret, etc. Okay, fine, you know. Took out the guitar, put it on the bench, knocked the nut off, start pulling the frets out. And that's when the tech who was working on it realized, wait a minute. The serial number on this guitar is not the same serial number as the tag. Because I guess he went to put something back in the case. And we had a shop assistant who switched. We had two Les Paul customs come in, and they were both black. And he switched the tags on them, and we wound up pulling the frets out of the wrong guitar that was only in for a setup. So that conversation had to take place later that afternoon with the customer, saying, guess what, you're getting a free refret with your free setup, but I'm going to need the guitar for longer than you originally thought you might. And I was telling this story to Rory Kaczynski about how we had to know, and the reason why I was telling it was because I had an employee come out that I handed a bunch of tags to, and I admonished him. I said, make sure the right one goes on the right case. You remember when we had a problem, just make sure I don't want to have to double check that. Just, double check before you put it on each case. And he went off with the tags, and Rory came over to me, he had his cup of coffee, and he said, what was that all about? And I explained him the story that I just told you about the two Les Pauls, one that didn't need to be refitted that was. And he says, you're making a copy of this for me. I said, yeah, that's the yellow copy for you to take home. He says, why don't you just make a third copy and put it on your desk? And I'm sitting there going, why didn't I hear this 15 years ago? Because I was already making a copy of it. I could make a third copy, put it in my inbox, and I can hang this on the case just as it came in, problem solved. So everything about our procedures was developed to solve a previous problem that was there. It wasn't, so because we were trying to make the most complicated intake process known to mankind. It was in order to eliminate those issues as they came up. That's why we have the process that we do have. But what I would say is anybody who's thinking about an intake process or refining theirs, do it in such a way, one, that best suits your personality and your interaction with the customer, but do it in such a way that it protects you against all of those things. Refine it in such a way that it solves those problems for you more than anything else.
One of the, I think that's absolutely right. I wanted to add one more thing that is rattling around in my head on the not doing evaluations in the point of contact, which is, when you think about like how amp techs work, like they do not do any of, or at least none that I know of, do evaluations at the
Right.
point
Mhm.
of contact. Some of that is just the nature of it. But as a result of that, there's a lot of distance created between the concept of the repair and the customer. And I hesitate to use the word mystique or something, but in this YouTube world where everybody knows a little bit of something about everybody else, if I'm standing there and I'm like, your guitar needs a neck reset, and they go, what's a neck reset? And then I proceed to get out my straight edge and show them the difference between where their neck is projecting now, and then go into the whole razzle dazzle about this whole thing's trying to become a bow and arrow, and it's bowing and blah 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 blah. I'm spending my time educating somebody on something that by and large, your average person, they don't need to know all that stuff. It doesn't do them any service, and in some way like all of a sudden now they feel like they know something. And in some ways, like, YouTube is responsible for us going in and having to deal with customers that show up at the door. My guitar needs a neck reset. And then you're like, all of a sudden you're going, you're working with their self-diagnosis. I'm sure doctors love the internet as much as we do. But the other thing too is, like, YouTube does it, but in some regards, the expectation that everybody's taken a guitar to a luthier at some point, and so they've been given this kind of language also by us. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a wrong thing, and I think customers should have some kind of working knowledge of it. It's just it's very disappointing that in amps everything is behind the chassis. They don't see what it is, and so there's this mysticism to it. Everything that we do is like, other than acoustics and the braces and stuff, but now everybody's got a light and a mirror now.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, this expectation that we have to have conversations with customers as though they're peers in this endeavor is just, I don't know. I think it's ultimately a recipe for making the job more difficult than Is that
Well, I'm going to take the other view from that because I do think it's a double-edged sword in the sense that everything you just said is completely valid and true. From my perspective, is I would rather be on the side of educating that customer. I try to do it in as efficiently a way as possible, which is why this thing here is so important to me, because when it comes to neck reset, it'll take me 30 seconds to draw the shape of a guitar on here and explain it for you. Or if I need to explain what's going on with a neck reset, I can very easily, reach for one of my props and have the discussion with the customer with my props, explaining to them what that is. Because once I've taken the few minutes to describe to a customer what's involved with the neck reset, how we have to sever the tongue from the fingerboard, we have to remove the 15th fret, we have to then access that gap between the dovetail and the mortise and the tenon, and then we have to either inject steam or heat in such a way where that we then have to force the neck off of that guitar in order to then realign the geometry of the guitar, where we're cutting the cheeks of the heel back here more than we are back here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the neck falls into the guitar that way. That, by the way, when you see that happen, you can tell that the geometry of my dovetail is now changed in relationship to the mortise the mortise that's here. So now my tenon has to be reshaped. At the end of that 4 or 5 minute conversation, I now have a customer looking at me going, that's why it takes so long for you to do a neck reset on my guitar. Where, on the other hand, if you have a customer who goes, okay, just go ahead and do a neck reset, to them, a neck reset sounds like I'm changing spark plugs. And maybe on some guitars, like a Taylor guitar, it might be that. But if it's a Martin, it's not. Or if it's a Gibson, or if it's a Guild, it's certainly not. So, that, from my perspective, is a way that, where we've spent a lot of time on our intake process is defending me against all of those miscommunications that can go wrong. And I like to inform the customer as I'm doing it. So I just take a different perspective from it. I would rather my customer know all of that nitty gritty. And in most cases, they'll be overwhelmed by it and go, okay, now I get it. Now I know why it's going to cost me $1,500 to have a neck reset done, Now I know why it's so expensive, And I've had other customers saying, why aren't we charging more? Jesus, it sounds like miserable,
I know, you were just describing it. I was like, I'm never doing one of those again. There's no way I could charge enough money to do all that. That sounds terrible.
So, do we want to examine this guitar real quick?
My wife is going to be home pretty quick, and I don't want to. I think this next part is probably the most important part of it, and I would like to devote a whole thing to it. And what I was thinking was, I think it would be good to maybe role play this out and can Sharon be a pretend customer?
Sure. Yeah.
I can't wait.
I heard on YouTube.
They do a compilation every
I heard on the YouTube my guitar needs a neck D set. What is that a thing?
So how do you want to do
Ted Woodford said?
You want to do that at the next D&D shows? That's what you want to do?
Or we could do it as a separate segment. But I think it's one of the things that I'd really like to see is the complete paper trail, the inspection, filling the forms out like you would fill it out and do like all the way, to when the guitar gets racked, and is ready to go. And then maybe in another segment later on down the road, we can watch the paperwork get turned into taxes.
Yeah, well, we're gonna do at some point. We're gonna do a business roundtable thing for tech.
Yeah, I think it would be good. But I think so. The way I see it, the inspection process could take. I don't want to. We could maybe squeeze it in an hour, but I don't want to rush it. I want to leave plenty of room for Q&A and stuff as we're doing it.
How do you feel about doing that for the next D&D show, Dan?
I think that would be a good. Or are you already burned out on this, Dan?
Whoops. It's fine with me.
Okay. Yeah. And maybe Dan, what we could do is maybe you have a really good example of a Martin inspection. Maybe Dan could have a electric guitar inspection to go through, and we could do two
Yeah,
inspections.
could you have a candidate for inspection on your end, Dan?
We have tons of them,
Good. So
Yeah.
I'd like
too
to be able
many
to
of
watch-
them.
I'd like
Yeah.
to be able to
But
watch.
I just want to point out that from listening to all this, I love the idea of emailing with customers. It really works well for me because I can write better than I can speak, and I can make a better friend by typing on my computer and
Mhm.
getting around any issues through email. It works great for me.
Yeah.
It's just,
Um,
and now that I'm thinking about it, what I won't use it, something one of you said was, I'm thinking now I could be Zooming with these customers and deciding if I even wanted to work for them at all.
yeah.
That's true too.
A 10-minute Zoom might just do everything
Yeah.
live.
It's a valuable tool. The world is getting crazy.
Well, plus
Um,
you get to see more of your customer that way, because if
yeah.
you got one of these in the background, you probably don't want to have to a whole lot to do with that customer.
By the way, is Igor here? Igor, are you here? Igor's got the scanning electron microscope for zooming with customers. Have you seen his setup for doing remote customer interactions?
No.
Oh, well, maybe in the next one we'll have.
Electron
We-
microscope.
Yeah, he's got a scanning electron microscope he's using for it. No, I'm just kidding. He's got like a benchtop like inspection like kind of wide angle microscope, but he's got a camera hooked into it so he can actually like zoom in on parts of the guitar and stuff. Like it's very cool. It also looks very expensive, but I'll talk to him about maybe doing a quick tour of that on the next one too. Special guest Guitar Quackery. So
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so next I think the next D&D show we'll do
before we adjourn,
separate examinations.
do we want to just make sure that nobody has any questions about what they've heard so far?
Yeah, I'm open to fielding questions, sure.
Oh, he's there. He's gesticulating and talking with what I'm assuming is a customer. Igor. I don't know. Hold on a second. I'm gonna actually just really quick.
Oh, we get to see his
Yeah.
customer interaction. So does anybody have any questions for us?
So this is a microscope with a nice light on it, and he's got like you can see there's a camera mounted in it over the top, so he can actually zoom with people and talk about their afflictions on their
I
guitars.
see he's got a barrier for the customer to be behind too.
Yeah.
I
Is
like
that a baby gate? That's perfect.
I would put a moat too as well.
Yeah. Yes, Carlos.
Doug, you mentioned that you worked with employees before. What is your experience, and why are you not working with employees anymore?
Well, that's the second question I think is the more important one.
Okay.
No, but we are actually I am planning a business chat to talk about both employees and apprentices and doing a roundtable with a bunch of people having to do that. I loved having employees. At one point, we grew to having 7 people in the shop, including Sharon and I. So there was a pretty sizable shop. At one point, it was swelled to 9 people in the shop, and it was a blast. I loved it. I was a terrible boss.
Okay.
I found that I found my temperament was not well suited to being a boss.
I see.
But I would go back and forth between wanting to be my employee's best friend to having to be a disciplinarian of sorts, and having a lot of struggle with the balance between those two aspects.
Okay.
When you become someone's quote unquote boss, when you become an employer, there's that sudden realization that you're responsible for someone else's livelihood. So they have to get paid first. They become the most important bill to pay at the end of every week, and it's got to be there. There were lots of times where when things were lean, that Sharon and I never got paid, because our employees had to get paid first, then our landlord had to get paid. Those are the two most important relationships you have in business. If you don't have a place to do your business and you don't have employees to do your work for you, then you're
Right.
out of business. And once you've contracted someone to work for you as an employee, you have now a financial relationship that they're trading a part of their life for the dollars you're giving them. It's as simple as that. All the other things about work quality, about managing time, about regulations and taxes and everything else that goes into having employees is all secondary. Suddenly, I'm the reason why they can pay their rent, their mortgage, or put food on their table. And I
Mhm.
have to run my business in such a fashion that money's there for them. I do think a lot of us in this business take on either apprentices or employees too early and too soon because they're so busy. They got so many guitars, they can't get all their hands on them. And, I'm going to have to start quoting, much longer turnaround times. And there's too much work for me to do all by myself. The first thing they think of is either getting an apprentice or an employee. That might be a very short lived issue. That when time marches on, and then a few months or a year or two down the road, for whatever economic conditions exist, things lighten up and there's less work there. There may not be enough revenue to pay them. The worst thing you can do to
Yeah.
sue an employee is saying, well, there's not enough work coming in the door to afford you, therefore I've got to let you go for a period of time, but maybe work will pick back up and you'll be there, you'll be able to come back. That's the worst thing you can do to an employee. So taking on an employee is a huge responsibility. We had at 1.7 of them, and some were part-time, some were full-time. Um, and putting aside everything else, as we grew, the biggest reason why we're employee less now is because I got to a point where I no longer enjoyed my job. Personally, it was just a personal thing because I suddenly, having that many people in the shop, I got to the shop early in the morning, before sometimes 7 in the morning, and I would be there until, past midnight. Because what would happen typically is I'd get there at 7 in the morning and I would look up at the clock, and all of a sudden it's 4 or 5 o'clock and I've got employees filing out the door saying goodbye for the day. And I've been stuck at my desk all day because
Okay.
I went from being a luthier to an administrator.
Okay.
And I was dealing with employees, timesheets, regulations, taxes, health insurance. And of course, every time when you bring an employee into your shop, you also become a part-time psychologist as well, because all of the problems they have at
Exactly.
home travel with them to work.
We have stories.
Oh
that
my
would
God, could I
just-
tell
Doug,
you? a story?
bottom line, were you more or less profitable with employees? Like at the
I
end of
think
the day?
I think it's a toss-up. I think at the end
Yeah.
of the day, because we certainly made a lot more revenue when there were 9 people swinging hammers at guitars. But by the same token, because we're in New York State, because we're in a very high regulated state, because taxes on employees are so high, and health insurance and
Mhm.
health, workman's comp and disability and all the other type of stuff. If I was paying an employee $50,000 a year in salary, it costing us somewhere just under $90,000 once all of the other factors and taxes and regulations and insurance and workman's comp, everything that was added on top of that employee's salary, wound up usually being almost 80% more on top of what we were paying them. So a $50,000 employee cost us $85,000 to $90,000 to have.
It would have been better to have the 2 employees at 50,000
Yeah.
rather than paying all that to the state.
Right.
They never got any of it.
Yeah.
Neither did
So
we,
it was the kind of thing where, we had to be very careful. And I tell people when they're thinking about taking on an apprentice that it depends on regulations and where you are and what your locality is. But
Mhm.
by the same token, just because you pay somebody $20 an hour, $50 an hour, $100 an hour, whatever you're going to pay them. Or there were some of our employees that were making in the 90s just at about 50 grand a year.
Wow.
And so we were paying well. And we had employees all the way up till 2010, 2009 or 2010. And so some of them by that time were making a good living. But the other part of it too is that you have to become a bookkeeper at that point, because it's not just good enough to know that that guy over there at that bench does the greatest nuts and setups, in this side of the Colorado, this side of the Rockies. It was also that when he does it, how fast does he do it? What kind of efficiency does he have? How much is he earning per hour versus how much he's costing you per hour? And you become an administrator and you have to do all of that kind of bookkeeping. And I became very disenchanted being that bookkeeper, because I didn't open up a guitar shop to become a guitar shop administrator. I opened up a guitar shop because I was good at working on guitars.
Right.
And at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock, when everybody went home, that's when my shop day started, because there were still neck resets that I had to do. Because when I did eventually get in the shop during the day, everybody was saying, Doug, can you come look at this? Doug, can you come look at that? Sharon would come over and say, I think you need to double check, Greg's work over there. So it was the kind of thing where I was working late nights in the shop just to keep up with my work that was supposed to be at my bench. And Sharon was there too. Sharon was right beside me,
All right, we should save something for the
That's a topic for another day.
that'll be a topic. I also like to note that the Rockies are actually pretty far away from here, so there are a considerable amount of luthiers in between here and there. So
yeah,
the chance that you got the best one,
Yeah. Thank you, Doug.
in between here and there is remote. So all right, everybody, let's adjourn for now. We're going to do a very special inspection for work episode next. And yeah, so thanks everybody for showing up. And yeah, can everybody unmute and thank Doug and Dan, and then probably
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You, Dan.